The Grumman A-6 Intruder was an American, twin-jet engine, mid-wing all-weather attack aircraft built by Grumman Aerospace, in service with the United States Navy and Marine Corps between 1963 and 1997. The Intruder was designed as an all-weather medium attack aircraft to replace the piston-engined Douglas A-1 Skyraider. As the A-6E was slated for retirement, its precision strike mission was taken over by the Grumman F-14 Tomcat equipped with a LANTIRN pod. From the A-6, a specialized electronic warfare derivative, the H-6, was developed. Design and development. Following the good showing of the propeller-driven AD-6/7 Skyraider in the Korean War, the United States Navy issued preliminary requirements in 1955 for an all-weather carrier-based attack aircraft. The U.S. Navy published an operational requirement document for it in October 1956. It released a request for proposals in February 1957. Proposals were submitted by Bell, Boeing, Douglas, Grumman, Lockheed Martin, North American, and Vought. Following evaluation of the bids, the U.S. Navy announced the selection of Grumman on 2 January 1958. The company was awarded a contract for the development of the A-2F-1 in February 1958. The prototype YA-2F-1 made the Intruder's first flight on 19 April 1960. The A-6's design team was led by Lawrence Meade, Jr. He later played a lead role in the design of the Grumman F-14 Tomcat and the Lunar Excursion Module. The jet nozzles were originally designed to swivel downwards for shorter takeoffs and landings. This feature was initially included on prototype aircraft, but was removed from the design during flight testing. The cockpit used an unusual double-pane windscreen and side-by-side seating arrangement in which the pilot sat in the left seat, while the bombardier navigator sat to the right and slightly below. The incorporation of an additional crew member with separate responsibilities, along with a unique cathode ray tube display that provided a synthetic display of terrain ahead, enabled low-level attack in all-weather conditions. The A-6's wing was very efficient at subsonic speeds compared to supersonic fighters such as the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II, which are also limited to subsonic speeds when carrying a payload of bombs. The wing was also designed to provide good maneuverability with a sizable bomb load. A very similar wing would be put on pivots on Grumman's later supersonic swing wing Grumman F-14 Tomcat, as well as similar landing gear. The Intruder was also equipped with the deceleron, a type of air brake on the wings with two panels that opened in opposite directions. In this case, one panel went up, while another went down. For its day, the Intruder had surprisingly sophisticated avionics, with a high degree of integration. It was felt that this could lead to extraordinary maintenance requirements to identify and isolate equipment malfunctions. Hence, the aircraft was provided with automatic diagnostic systems, some of the earliest computer-based analytic equipment developed for aircraft. These were known as Basic Automated Checkout Equipment, or BACE. There were two levels, known as Line BACE, to identify specific malfunctioning systems in the aircraft, while in the hangar or on the flight line, and Shop BACE, to exercise and analyze individual malfunctioning systems in the maintenance shop. This equipment was manufactured by Litton Industries. Together, the BACE systems greatly reduced the maintenance man-hours per flight hour, a key index of the cost and effort needed to keep military aircraft operating. The Intruder was equipped to carry and launch a nuclear bomb, and Navy crews regularly planned for assigned nuclear missions. Because the A-6 was a low-flying attack aircraft, an unusual method was developed for launching an atomic bomb, should that ever be required. Known as LABZIP, it called for a high-speed, low-level approach. Nearing the target point, the pilot would put the aircraft into a steep climb. At a computer-calculated point in the climb, the weapon would be released, with momentum carrying it upwards and forwards. The pilot would continue the climb even more steeply, until near a vertical position the aircraft would be rolled and turned, heading back in the direction from which it came. It would then depart from the area at maximum acceleration. During this time, the bomb would rise to an apex, still heading in its original direction, then begin to fall towards the target while traveling further forward. At a pre-programmed height, it would detonate. By that time, the intruder would be several miles away, traveling at top speed, and thus able to stay ahead of the shock wave from the explosion. This unusual maneuver was known as an over-the-shoulder bomb launch. Operational history. Entering service in Vietnam War, the Intruder received a new standardized U.S. designation of A-6A in the autumn of 1962, and entered squadron service in February 1963. The A-6 became both the U.S. Navy's and U.S. Marine Corps' principal medium and all-weather night attack aircraft from the mid-1960s through the 1990s, and as an aerial tanker either in the dedicated Ka-6D version or by use of a buddy store, whereas the A-6 fulfilled the USN and USMC all-weather ground attack strike mission role. This mission in the USAF was served by the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief and later the F-111, the latter which also saw its earlier F-111A variants converted to a radar jammer as the F-111 Raven, analogous to the USN and USMC A-6B Prowler. A-6 Intruders first saw action during the Vietnam War, where the craft were used extensively against targets in Vietnam. The aircraft's long range and heavy payload coupled with its ability to fly in all weather made it invaluable during the war. However, its typical mission profile of flying low to deliver its payload made it especially vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire. And in the 8 years the Intruder was used during the Vietnam War, the U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps lost a total of 84 A-6 aircraft of various series. The first loss occurred on 14 July 1965 when an Intruder from Attack Squadron 75 from the carrier Independence, flown by Lt. Donald Boker and Lt. Donald Eaton, commenced to dive on a target near Laos. An explosion under the starboard wing damaged the starboard engine, causing the aircraft to catch fire and the hydraulics to fail. Seconds later the port engine failed, the controls froze, and the 2 crewmen ejected. Both crewmen survived. Of the 84 Intruders lost to all causes during the war, 10 were shot down by surface-to-air missiles, 2 were shot down by MiGs, 16 were lost to operational causes, and 56 were lost to conventional ground fire and AAA. The last Intruder to be lost during the war was from Attack Squadron 35, flown by LTCM Graf and LTS H. Patfield from the carrier America. They were shot down by ground fire on 24 January 1973 while providing close air support. The airmen ejected and were rescued by a Navy helicopter. 20 U.S. Navy aircraft carriers rotated through the waters of Southeast Asia, providing airstrikes from the early 1960s through the early 1970s. 9 of those carriers lost A-6 Intruders. Constellation lost 11, Ranger lost 8, Coral Sea lost 6, Midway lost 2, Independence lost 4, Kitty Hawk lost 14, Saratoga lost 3, Enterprise lost 8, and America lost 2. Although capable of embarking aboard aircraft carriers, most U.S. Marine Corps A-6 Intruders were shore-based in South Vietnam at Chu Lai and Da Nang and in Nam Phong, Thailand. Lebanon and later action. A-6 Intruders were later used in support of other operations, such as the multinational force in Lebanon in 1983. On 4 December, one LTVA-7 Corsair II and one Intruder were downed by Syrian missiles. The Intruder's pilot, Lieutenant Mark Longy, and bombardier navigator Lieutenant Robert Bobby Goodman ejected immediately before the crash. Longy died of his injuries while Goodman was captured and taken by the Syrians to Damascus, where he was released on 3 January 1984. Later in the 1980s, two Naval Reserve A-7 Corsair II light attack squadrons, VA-205 and VA-305, were reconstituted as medium attack squadrons with the A-6C at NAS Atlanta, Georgia and NAS Alameda, California, respectively. Intruders also saw action in April 1986 operating from the aircraft carriers US America and Coral Sea during the bombing of Libya. The squadrons involved were VA-34 Blue Blasters and VA-55 Warhorses. During Operation Desert Storm in 1991, U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps A-6s flew more than 4,700 combat sorties, providing close air support, destroying enemy air defenses, attacking Iraqi naval units, and hitting strategic targets. They were also the U.S. Navy's primary strike platform for delivering laser-guided bombs. The U.S. Navy operated them from the aircraft carriers Saratoga, John F. Kennedy, Midway, Ranger, America, and Theodore Roosevelt, while U.S. Marine Corps A-6s operated ashore, primarily from Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain. 3 A-6s were shot down in combat by SAMs and AAA. The Intruder's large blunt nose and slender tail inspired a number of nicknames, including Double Ugly, the Mighty Alpha 6, Iron Tadpole, and also Drumstick. Following Desert Storm, Intruders were used to patrol the no-fly zone in Iraq and provided air support for U.S. Marines during Operation Restore Hope in Somalia. The last A-6C Intruder left U.S. Marine Corps service on 28 April 1993. The A-6 also saw further duty over Bosnia in 1994. Retirement. Despite the production of new airframes in the 164XXX Bureau number series just before and after Operation Desert Storm, augmented by a re-winging program of older airframes, the A-6E and Ka-6D were quickly phased out of service in the mid-1990s in a U.S. Navy cost-cutting move driven by the Office of the Secretary of Defense to reduce the number of different type, model, series of aircraft in carrier air wings and U.S. Marine aircraft groups. The A-6 was intended to be replaced by the McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger II, but that program was cancelled due to cost overruns. The Intruder remained in service for a few more years before being retired in favor of the LANTIRN-equipped Grumman F-14 Tomcat, which was in turn replaced by the Boeing FA-180F Super Hornet in the U.S. Navy and the twin-seat FA-18D Hornet in the U.S. Marine Corps. The last Intruders were retired on 28 February 1997. Many in the U.S. defense establishment in general, and naval aviation in particular, questioned the wisdom of a shift to a shorter-range carrier-based strike force, as represented by the Hornet and Super Hornet, compared to the older generation aircraft such as the Intruder and Tomcat. However, the availability of USAF Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker and McDonnell Douglas KC-10 extended tankers modified to accommodate USN, USMC and NATO tactical aircraft in all recent conflicts was perceived by certain senior decision-makers in the Department of Defense to put a lesser premium on organic aerial refueling capability in the U.S. Navy's carrier air wings and self-contained range among carrier-based strike aircraft. Although the Intruder could not match the F-14s of the F-A-18's speed or air combat capability, the A-6's range and load-carrying ability are still unmatched by newer aircraft in the fleet. At the time of retirement, several retired A-6 airframes were awaiting re-winging at the Northrop Grumman facility at St. Augustine Airport, Florida. These were later sunk off the coast of St. Johns County, Florida, to form a fish haven named Intruder Reef. Surviving aircraft fitted with the new wings, as well as later production aircraft not earmarked for museum and non-flying static display, were stored at the AMARG Storage Center at Davis Mountain Air Force Base, Arizona. Variants YA-6A and A-6A. The H prototypes and pre-production Intruder aircraft were sometimes referred to with the YA-6A designation. These were used in the development and testing of the A-6A Intruder. The initial version of the Intruder was built around the complex and advanced DIAN, intended to provide a high degree of bombing accuracy even at night and in poor weather. DIAN consisted of multiple radar systems, the Norden systems and APQ-92 search radar replacing the AN APQ-88 on YA-6A, and a separate AN APG-46 for tracking, an APN-141 radar altimeter, and an APN-122 Doppler navigational radar to provide position updates to the LANTIRN and ASN-31 inertial navigation system, an air data computer, and an ASQ-61 ballistics computer integrated the radar information for the bombardier navigator in the right-hand seat. TACAN and ADF were also provided for navigational use. When it worked, DIAN was perhaps the most capable nav attack system of its era, giving the Intruder the ability to fly and fight in even very poor conditions. It suffered numerous teething problems, and it was several years before its reliability was established. Total A-6A production was 480, excluding the prototype and pre-production aircraft. A total of 47 A-6s were converted to other variants, A-6B, to provide U.S. Navy squadrons with a defense suppression aircraft to attack enemy anti-aircraft defense and SAM missile systems, a mission dubbed Iron Hand by the U.S. Navy. 19 A-6s were converted to A-6B version during 1967 to 1970. The A-6B had many of its standard attack systems removed in favor of specialized equipment to detect and track enemy radar sites and to guide AGM-45 Shrike and AGM-78 standard anti-radiation missiles, with an APQ-103 radar replacing earlier an APQ-92 used in the A-6A, plus an APN-153 navigational radar replacing earlier an APN-122, again used in the A-6A. Between 1968 and 1977, several Intruder squadrons operated A-6Bs alongside the regular A-6As. 5 were lost to all causes, and the survivors were later converted to A-6E standard in the late 1970s. A-6C-12 A-6As were converted in 1972 A-6C standard for night attack missions against the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam. They were fitted with a trails, roads interdiction multi-sensor pod in the fuselage for FLIR and low-light TV cameras, as well as a macro engine ignition detection system. Radars were also upgraded, with an APQ-112 replacing earlier an APQ-103 in A-6B, and an APN-186 navigational radar replacing earlier an APN-153 in earlier A-6B. A vastly improved Sperry Corporation and APQ-127 radar replaced earlier an APG-46 fire control radar in A-6A-B. One of these aircraft was lost in combat, the others were later converted to A-6E standard after the war. Ka-6D to replace both the Ka-3B and EA-3B Skywarrior during the early 1970s. 78 A-6s and 12 A-6s were converted for use as tanker aircraft, providing aerial refueling support to other strike aircraft. The Diane system was removed and an internal refueling system was added, sometimes supplemented by a D-704 refueling pod on the centerline pylon. The Ka-6D theoretically could be used in the day visual bombing role, but it apparently never was, with the standard loadout being 4 fuel tanks. Because it was based on a tactical aircraft platform, the Ka-6D provided a capability for mission tanking, the ability to keep up with strike packages and refuel them in the course of a mission. A few Ka-6Ds went to sea with each Intruder squadron. Their operation was integrated into the Intruder squadrons, as A-6 crew were trained to operate both aircraft, and the NATOPS covered both the A-6 and Ka-6D. These aircraft were always in short supply, and frequently were cross-decked, from a returning carrier to an outgoing one. Many Ka-6 airframes had severe G restrictions, as well as fuselage stretching due to almost continual use and high number of catapults and traps. The retirement of the aircraft left a gap in USN and USMC refueling tanker capability. The USN Lockheed S-3 Viking filled that gap until the new FA-180F Super Hornet became operational. A-6E, the definitive attack version of the Intruder with vastly upgraded navigation and attack systems, introduced in 1970 and first deployed on the 9th of December 1971. The earlier separate search and track radars of the A-6A-B-C were replaced by a single, Norden and APQ-148 in multi-mode radar, and on-board computers with a more sophisticated IC-based system, as opposed to the A-6A's Diane discrete transistor-based technology. A new ASN-92 inertial navigation system was added, along with the canes, for greater navigation accuracy. Beginning in 1979, all A-6s were fitted with the AAS-33DRS, part of the Target Recognition and Attack Multi-Sensor System, of small, gyroscopically stabilized turret mounted under the nose of the aircraft, containing a FLIR bore sighted with a laser spot tracker, designator, and IBM and ASQ-155 computer. Tram was matched with a new Norden and APQ-156 radar. The BN could use both tram imagery and radar data for extremely accurate attacks, or use the tram sensors alone to attack without using the Intruder's radar. Tram also allowed the Intruder to autonomously designate and drop laser-guided bombs. In addition, the Intruder used airborne moving target indicator, which allowed the aircraft to track a moving target and drop ordnance on it even though the target was moving. Also, the computer system allowed the use of offset aimpoint, giving the crew the ability to drop on a target unseen on radar by noting coordinates of a known target nearby and entering the offset range and bearing to the unseen target. In the 1980s, the A-6C tram aircraft were converted to the A-6C WCSI version to add additional weapons capability. This added the ability to carry and target some of the first-generation precision-guided weapons, like the AGM-84 Harpoon missile, and AGM-123 Skipper. The WCSI aircraft was eventually modified to have a limited capability to use the AGM-84 SLAM standoff land attack missile. Since the Harpoon and SLAM missiles had common communication interfaces, WCSI aircraft could carry and fire SLAM missiles, but needed a nearby A-6ES WIP to guide them to target. In the early 1990s, some surviving A-6s were upgraded under SWIP to enable them to use the latest precision-guided munitions, including AGM-65 Mavericks, AGM-84 SLAMs, AGM-62 Warlies and the AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missile, as well as additional capability with the AGM-84 Harpoon. A coprocessor was added to the ASQ-155 computer system to implement the needed mil-spec 1553 digital interfaces to the pylons, as well as an additional control panel. After a series of wing fatigue problems, about 85% of the fleet was fitted with new graphite, epoxy, titanium, aluminum composite wings. The new wings proved to be a mixed blessing, as a composite wing is stiffer and transmits more force to the fuselage, accelerating fatigue in the fuselage. In 1990, the decision was made to terminate production of the A-6. Through the 1970s and 1980s, the A-6 had been in low-rate production of 4 or 5 new aircraft a year, enough to replace mostly accidental losses. The final production order was for 20 aircraft of the SWIP configuration with composite wings, delivered in 1993. A-6C models totaled 445 aircraft, about 240 of which were converted from earlier A-6A, B, C models. A-6F and A-6G. An advanced A-6F Intruder II was proposed in the mid-1980s that would have replaced the Intruder's elderly Pratt & Amp Whitney J52 turbojets with non-afterburning versions of the General Electric F404 turbofan used in the F/A-18 Hornet, providing substantial improvements in both power and fuel economy. The A-6F would have had totally new avionics, including an Norden APQ-173 synthetic aperture radar and multifunction cockpit displays. The APQ-173 would have given the Intruder air-to-air capacity with provision for the AIM-120 AMRAAM. 2 additional wing pylons were added, for a total of 7 stations. Although 5 development aircraft were built, the U.S. Navy ultimately chose not to authorize the A-6F, preferring to concentrate on the A-12 Avenger II. This left the service in a quandary when the A-12 was cancelled in 1991. Grumman proposed a cheaper alternative in the A-6G, which had most of the A-6F's advanced electronics, but retained the existing engines. This, too, was cancelled. Electronic warfare versions. An electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures version of the Intruder was developed early in the aircraft's life, for the USMC, which needed a new ECM platform to replace its elderly F-3D-2Q Sky Knights. A new version of the Intruder, initially designated A-2F-1H and subsequently redesignated A-6A, first flew on the 26th of April 1963. It had a bunker remote and ALQ-86 ECM suite, with most electronics contained on the walnut-shaped pod atop the vertical fin. They were equipped with an APQ-129 fire control radar, and theoretically capable of firing the AGM-45 Shrike anti-radiation missile, although they were apparently not used in that role. The navigational radar is an APN-153. Only 28 H-6s were built, serving with U.S. Marine Corps squadrons in Vietnam. It was phased out of frontline service in the mid-1970s, remaining in use in reserve VMCJ units with the USMC and then the United States Navy in specialized VAQ units, primarily for training purposes. The last EA-6A had been retired by 1993. A much more highly specialized derivative of the Intruder was the EA-6B Prowler, having a stretched airframe with 2 additional systems operators, and more comprehensive systems for the electronic warfare and SAAD roles. A derivative of an APQ-156, an APS-130 was installed as the main radar for EA-6B. The navigational radar was upgraded to an APS-133 from the APN-153 on EA-6A. In total, 170 were produced. The EA-6B took on the duties of the U.S. Air Force F-111 Raven when the DoD decided to let the U.S. Navy handle all electronic warfare missions. The Prowler remains in service as of 2012, but is being replaced by the EA-18G Growler in the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Marine Corps does not intend to acquire the EA-18G and will continue to operate the EA-6B for the near future, acquiring some U.S. Navy H-6Bs as they are replaced by the EA-18G. Pre-production aircraft 8 built with the first 4 with rotating jet exhaust pipes, redesignated YA-6A in 1962. First production variant with fixed tailpipe, 484 built, redesignated A-6A in 1962. YA-2F1H prototype electronic warfare variant, 1 modified from A-2F1, redesignated YEA-6A in 1962. A-2F1H, YA-6A pre-production aircraft redesignated from YA-2F1 in 1962. A-6A first production variant redesignated from A-2F1 in 1962. YA-6A1 YA-2F1 electronic warfare variant prototype redesignated in 1962. EA-6A electronic warfare variant redesignated from A-2F1H had a redesigned fin and rudder and addition of an ECM radome able to carry underwing ECM pods. 3 YA-6A and 4 A-6As converted and 21 built. An A-6A the redesignation of 3 YA-6As and 3 A-6As. The 6 aircraft were modified for special tests. An EA-6A-1 EA-6A aircraft was modified for special test purposes. TA-6A proposed trainer variant with 3-seat not built. A-6B day interdiction variant of the A-6A with simplified avionics. 19 conversions from A-6A and production batch of 54 aircraft were cancelled. A-6B Prowler electronic warfare variant of the A-6A with longer fuselage for 4 crew. YA-6B the designation of 2 EA-6B prototypes which were modified for special test purposes. A-6C A-6A conversion for low-level attack role with electro-optical sensors. 12 converted. KA-6D A-6A conversion for flight refueling. 58 converted. A-6C A-6A with improved electronics. VA candidate, unbuilt single-seat A-6 base design proposal for competition for A-4 Skyhawk replacement based on existing design. Contract ultimately awarded to the LTV A-7 Corsair II operators. United States Navy, United States Marine Corps.